Hey guys, it's James Dainard with Heaton Dainard Real Estate and Project RE. For more construction and flip tips, follow me on my Instagram at jdainflips. So today we're back at BiggerPockets and we're going to discuss red flags for your next potential investment. So things we're going to cover is what to look for, how to mitigate that risk and how to budget for it, weekend warrior specials and how to identify what that is and the repercussions of that, items that you can't see and how you need to handle that in your feasibility or your offer terms so your budget doesn't get blown up by items that you can't see, touch, and feel. Only problem? I bought it from a fake seller.
James Dainard just walked over to my desk.
If you skip the first 3 steps, that's the easiest way to lose money. So we've been flipping homes in the Pacific Northwest for over 12 years. We've done over 3,000 flip projects and we've learned all sorts of valuable lessons. We've bought homes that we thought were more cosmetic fixers that turned out they were falling over and they kind of caved in on themselves. We've bought homes that we thought were major fixers that turned out to be a lot better than we were. So we've seen it all. So today what we're going to talk about is the things that we look for when we're walking through an investment to make sure we're not buying that next problem project. No matter what you do as an investor to mitigate risk, you're always going to run into some sort of problem project. It's about how do you identify it and then how do you come up with the solution. But what we're going to do is to help you narrow down or reduce the percentage or your chance of buying that next problem. So before you do your walkthrough, the first thing I can tell you is make sure that you're prepared. You want to make sure that you have the right tools to do the proper walkthrough so you can catch little weird things. So on my walkthroughs, things that I always bring with me is my walkthrough sheet, right? This allows me to take notes of what I'm seeing. I take my camera or my cell phone. I want to notate what I'm actually seeing in the project so I can go back and do either more research or due diligence or run it by my contractor if it seems a little off. I always have a flashlight and I always have a tape measure. And I also, if I can remember, bring a level with me, because things that are crooked can really throw the balance of your profit way off. So after I come prepared and items that I'm looking for, first thing that were telling me that are gonna be bigger items that are not in my normal budget. What we've done over the last 12 years is we created a good budget sheet or an intake sheet, which we can notate. It goes into our budget sheet. We know what our cost per square foot is. We know what our install rates are, but it's not gonna tell us about the weird stuff. So when walking through our next potential investment, we're checking for certain things. Are the floors sloped? That's the biggest red flag for me. If I'm noticing a certain shift in a property, that's gonna be 2 different types of solutions I might need to do. Either it could be as simple as the house just settled and I gotta lay in subfloors, which are gonna cost me about $1,000 to level out, or it could be a massive foundation problem that can cost me $20,000. Are they sloped going into one corner or are they sloped on both corners? Is the house bowing up? All these are going to tell me what's going on with the actual structure of the property. Are there signs of asbestos? Again, that's a cost driver that can cost thousands of dollars and you can't just put a tangible on it. If I'm seeing signs of asbestos, which could be HVAC ducts that are wrapped with tape, a lot of times that's wrapped with asbestos, it could be popcorn ceilings, it could be the types of siding. If I'm seeing all these things, a lot of times what I'm going to do during my feasibility is get the asbestos survey, because that survey is going to tell me how much abatement I need to actually do. Other things that I'm looking for that can be major red flags on a property. Is there water intrusion? In the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of rain. Water gets in from all different ways. If I'm seeing signs of water intrusion in the walls, or it could be in the basement, that could be signs that the house is leaking in all sorts of different spots. Water leaking into your house is detrimental for your home. It gets through your walls, it starts rotting out the core structure of your home, which is the lumber and the wood, and it can cause more damage than an actual fire on a home. I've actually pulled drywall off houses and all of a sudden we look at it and we think it's fire damage, but turned out it was just water leaking. So as I'm doing my walkthrough, I'm checking to see if there's moisture in the basement. Is there any kind of moisture on the window edges? Are the windows leaking? I'm looking my head in the attic to see if there's any kind of mold or leaking going on in there, and I'm checking for that damage to make sure I'm not gonna have to remediate that later. Another red flag that I check for is actually the square footage. Before I drive a site, I always make sure to print out the tax record, which you can get on usually your local government sites or your local county sites. I want to see what the square footage is. Many times I'll go into a house and I'll say, okay, this house is 1,000 square feet, 3 bed, 1 bath. And when I get in, I notice that the house now feels a little bigger and it actually looks like it's got an extra 200 square feet, or it's got an extra room, and it went from a 3-bed, 1-bath to a 4-bed, 2-bath. Other things I'm looking for are signs of broken concrete and settlement. Do I have issues with my soil, or is the house, maybe it wasn't framed correctly, maybe it's not structurally sound? So as I walk around these properties, I walk the perimeter. Do I see any stress cracks coming through the foundation? You know, stress cracks is actually very simple to fix, and they're actually not that uncommon, to where you caulk it and you strap it through that way. Not the end of the world. But if I'm seeing a stress crack in numerous spots of the foundation, and then I maybe see a bigger crack that could have more of like a ½ centimeter crack, that's telling me I might have some structural issues going on. So again, that dictates how much money I'm gonna have to spend. So always walk all your concrete surfaces. Look at your retaining walls. You know, are they leaning over? That is a very expensive fix. Also, it's telling you a story about the house. If I got sunken sidewalks, sideways retaining walls, and a house that's all crooked, I have soil issues typically. So all these little signs, you know, check your sidewalks, check your retaining walls, check your foundation cracks. Make sure that they're all not telling you and giving you indicators that you could be missing. The other thing that you gotta look for is the hitting costs. You know, one valuable lesson that we learned years ago, right? Like probably, especially when I was a newer investor, I was just getting into flipping. I learned a lot of hard lessons back then. One of the biggest lessons I learned is be on the lookout for the Weekend Warrior special houses. So what does that even mean? So the Weekend Warrior special is actually something that we kind of termed in our office like 9-10 years ago, is the ones you walk into and you go, oh, this isn't that bad of a house. It's got brand new flooring. Look, there's drywall. It's got upgraded doors. And if you do a really quick walkthrough on it and you blow in and out and you don't take time to look, you don't notice the weird things that are going on. So the reason it's called Weekend Warrior Special, guy works 9 to 5 or somebody works 9 to 5 and then on the weekends they get together with their buddies. They have, you know, they got a little party and they start fixing things. They want to upgrade things. They might have their buddy Frank putting in their lights with them. They might have their buddy Steve that says he's good at putting cabinets, is helping them put cabinets in. And the homeowners work on the project over time, and a lot of times they're not using qualified general contractors, qualified tradesmen. They're doing all the work themselves. Not only that, they're not even pulling permits on this stuff. So you have an unqualified person working on their house with no oversight from the city. This can cause for massive problems. You know, as we got to these homes, we go in and you see they're shiny, right? There's good floors, there's good doors, and they feel good, almost like rent ready. So the things you can do to tell the difference between a professional remodeled it or a Weekend Warrior is start to look at the flow of the house. That's my number one sign right away. Are there bedrooms in weird spaces? Are the floor or the ceiling heights a little bit off, right? Is one bedroom shorter than the other? If it doesn't flow right, it typically wasn't designed by an architect, which also means that it typically wasn't permitted and it also wasn't professionally laid out. His buddy Steve thought it'd be good to put a bedroom in this quiet location, right? They're things that aren't quite making sense. So the flow of the property is my number one sign, if spaces are in the wrong spaces. The other thing that I'm looking for is where's the location of the mechanicals? Right? I could walk into a kitchen, it could have some newer cabinets, it could have newer appliances in there. But if I'm looking in the backsplash and I see one outlet in there, that means that a licensed electrician probably didn't do the work because it's not up to new code, right? If they're gonna remodel the whole kitchen and put in brand new appliances and maybe move locations around, but they didn't know what the code was, that's a sign that a professional didn't do it. You know, in my own personal experience, I've actually bought homes where I thought the kitchen was amazing, it was great, perfect for resale, and then as we start digging into it, the plumbing's not working right, the electrical's not working right, and we spent just as much money on a house that looked renovated as we did from a house that was falling down, because we still had to do the same thing. We had to rip it completely out, fix all the mechanicals, and put it back together. So again, check those locations of where the mechanicals are. So you can pull your codes, look at the code locations, and if they're not done right, chances are a professional didn't do it and the Weekend Warrior had his way with the house. You want to budget for a full rework at that point in that time. Other things that I'm looking for that is a sign of a Weekend Warrior special, is there extra space that isn't accounted for in the tax record? I walked into homes that were supposed to be 1,000 square feet and they turned out to be 1,800 square feet because the homeowner decided to just build 2 rooms and a bathroom there with no permits. Doing that is a complete disaster in your construction plan. You know, if you go pull permits, so if I go buy a house that's 1,000 square feet, or you know, it's 1,800 square feet, but the homeowner didn't permit that 800 square foot addition, and I go to pull a permit on the rest of my stuff, the city then can make me required to update the whole home to new code. So it goes from being a cosmetic reno to having to go studs down on an 1,800 square foot house. That's actually happened to me a couple different times back in my early days. I was like, oh, well, the foundation looked good, the homeowner did it, I didn't do the work, not my problem. No, turns out it can be your problem. All of a sudden you have to budget for renovating an 1,800 square foot house instead of a cosmetic. That's gonna 5x your budget and cost you thousands of dollars. So again, grab your tax records, make sure the square footages match up, and if you have extra space, that it was permitted. Another thing that I'm looking for is floor heights and ceiling heights. As I walk through a house, I'm kind of feeling the flow. If I walk into a living room and the floor height's at 10 feet, dining room's at 8 feet, and then the kitchen's at 8 feet, and then each bedroom's at 7 feet to where they're all consistent everywhere, again, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? Most professionals aren't gonna install stuff that way. So either the homeowner, for some reason, dropped the ceiling down to add in their own electrical, or they didn't plan it all through, but that's gonna require me, that usually is gonna be an indicator or a tip that I'm gonna have to rip that ceiling out, fix whatever electrical is going on there, fix whatever ducting's going on, and get it back to normal. So as you see things that aren't normal in your typical renovation, it's, again, the biggest sign that you can see that a professional didn't do it. So other things that I'm looking for, guys, I mean, there's a laundry list of things we can go look for, and we're gonna go out to a site and look at that. But other things I'm looking for is, how is the framing, right? If you go into a basement and there's bedroom walls that don't quite line up or they're out of flush, that means a professional framer probably didn't frame it correctly. Or if you go out, my favorite part to go look on a property is at the decks, right? It can have a brand new deck, but if it's not installed correctly, you're gonna have to rip that whole thing off, right? Because what a deck actually needs in new code is actual footings. It needs to be lag bolted into the structure of the home. So as I'm walking a deck, I'm looking for the lag bolts. I'm looking to see what kind of lumber they built it with. If all the posts in the deck aren't built with pressure treated, that means someone that didn't know what building code was installed that deck. So these are all signs that will tell you who did the work and what you should be cautious for. So as I'm walking through properties and I'm seeing all these signs, there's certain steps that you can do to mitigate that risk. Call a home inspector. Call a licensed and bonded professional that can check all the building code and kind of give you more indicating signs. A lot of what they can do is, as they're doing their inspection, is actually check certain things like date stamps on wires. That's one of my favorite ways to also catch things. If the house was built in 1950s and there's been no permits ever pulled, and I go into the attic and there's Romax up there, I can find a stamp on the Romax that tells me when that was installed. If it wasn't permitted and it's all jerry-rigged everywhere, chances are I need to budget for a full rewire, not just a patch rewire. So things like hiring a home inspector can also facilitate that for you. Another thing you can do is go to your local city or county and pull the permits associated with the property. In the city of Seattle, we can go to kingcounty.gov and pull any kind of permit associated with any home that we're looking at purchasing. If the home's been completely renovated, but it's a little bit crooked, things aren't kind of flowing right, and there's been no permits pulled, again, that's gonna tell me a non-professional did this. I don't know any electrician that wants to come in and fully rewire a house with that's not licensed and bonded and that doesn't want to get a permit. So again, check the permit history. That will be an indicator if you have hidden problems inside that wall. And if you don't know quite what to look for, you don't quite know if it's a weekend warrior special house, call your contractor. They'll know the building codes. They're going to see these things a little bit more. And contractors love telling you there's more work to do at a project, but bring them out, get their opinion. And lastly, what you can do is get the seller's disclosure statement. In Washington State, one of the questions is, has the property been renovated? Has all permits been pulled? Have they been finalized? If I'm reading my self-disclosure statement and they say, yes, there's been a remodel, but no permits have been pulled, again, that's going to be a red flag that I need to do further inspections. Don't bypass these inspections unless you know how to fix these kind of issues. I do waive inspection on a lot of the homes that I purchase, but I can do that because I just budget accordingly. So if I go into a weekend warrior special house, say it's a 1920s house, it's all cosmetically updated, and it doesn't quite feel right. I'm gonna run my same budget that I would do for a massive fixture at a 1920s home, because I'm actually still doing the same amount of work. I'm still gonna pull out everything and still put it back together. I'm just starting with a shinier start at this point. So now what we're gonna do is go out to a house and look for those next potential problems. We're gonna walk through, I'm gonna notate what I see, what I don't see, and what next steps I should do to further investigate that issue. All right, so we are on site for our Weekend Warrior special house that we just contracted about 3 weeks ago. So to give you a background on the deal, sellers actually reached out to us because we buy a lot of properties in the area. They said, hey, we have this house, we want to sell it. We've been remodeling it for the last 5 years. It's in really good shape. They sent us photos. And again, when we got the photos, they looked pretty good. It looked like it had a decent roof. The windows were okay. They had done some electrical upgrades. They said they had serviced the pool. So originally when we underwrote this, we only put a budget of $60,000 on it. We sent them out the offer. They said, yes, that offer works. And then we came and did our walkthrough. And what we noticed was a lot of upgrades have happened over time, but the issue was they were done by the homeowner, not inspected, not with licensed professionals, and we end up having to redo almost all of it. So what that has required is for us to increase our budget by almost 2 times the amount. We went from a $60,000 budget to $120,000. We had to renegotiate the deal. We met with the owner, went over all the major issues. They actually took the price reduction because we gave them the logic behind it. And so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna walk you through the property and show you the items that we saw were red flags for buying the next potential flip property. Again, these weekend warrior houses are hard to identify sometimes, and that's why it's so important to work with a good professional team like you have at Heaton Dainard Real Estate. They can kind of walk you through the actual scope of work and the right plan for it. So the first thing I see as we kind of get up to the property is I'm seeing an addition right here with an atrium. This is not typically how this is supposed to look. In addition to, I know it wasn't done by an architect because schematically it doesn't line up. So that's already a red flag for me that they built this addition illegally. Actually, and even getting to the first steps, I noticed a couple things that aren't built right. So as I'm looking at this deck, we have a not built correctly, moves up and down, and it sits right on the earth of the ground. Wood sitting on wet soil is gonna cause rot. It's gonna cause deterioration. So a lot of times this wood would actually be okay, but we're gonna have to rip this whole thing out and rebuild the deck. That's a $4,000 cost that we didn't originally see. So again, on the weekend warrior houses, you wanna check for these things. Like, start to look how they are built. No framer is gonna build this right down onto the floor. That's the red flag. Also what I see is in here, they built the support joist right on the dirt again. There's no footings, there's nothing to support it. So the homeowner looks like they just kind of came out here with their buddies, banged it out in a weekend, and they just set it out the way they wanted. This is built the wrong way. So even if it has good wood, we still have to rip the whole thing out and replace it. Here's another red flag, and it can be as simple as gutters, right? And gutters typically cost us about $1,200 for a house. But as I'm looking at this tells me that a professional didn't do this, and we're probably gonna have to redo our gutters. Originally thought we could keep a lot of them. But what I'm seeing is I'm seeing 2 different style gutter systems. This is a colonial mixed in with a regular. That means they bought it in separate times and they kind of just spliced it together. It was not a professional install job. Also, look how it's routed down. Because of where they put their placement, because it wasn't a professional gutter company, they put it in the wrong spot, and so then they had to angle it down, and now it just drops off into the corner of our property. Again, we didn't think we were gonna have to replace our gutters, but we have to, because when you have water running into the corner of your property, it causes settlement and it can cause foundation issues. So again, this was a $1,200 item we did not account for in the original photos. So again, this is a sign of a bad install job, which looks like it was done by a non-professional person. Look at this kind of gutter. This one's got holes on it so it can leak out the side. I've actually never seen this before. So let's continue our tour of our weekend warriors house. Oh, this one's a good one. This one's got a lot of funk going on in it. So as I get into the entryway, and just so everyone knows, this is the first time I've ever been here. So I'm already looking at this frame job here, and this is gonna have to be torn out, right? This was non-permitted. And also what they did, I'm looking at their install job here, they didn't know how to set their wood correctly against the brick. So what they use? Super glue. That's not gonna hold your structure up. I literally, if I jammed into this right now, we probably could knock it right off tilt. So again, this tells me that we need to pay attention. It's a sign that things were done incorrectly. So as we were coming in, this was probably the finished porch before. They installed a new front door. Again, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the best signs you can have for a problem house on a flip one is, does it actually make sense and does it flow right? This is a door that's supposed to have 2 side lights. What they did is they go, oh, we got this door probably on clearance or maybe on sale, and they decided to just frame in a door and put one side light in because that's the best they could do. This also tells me that they just didn't quite do anything right. So these are signs, right? When things don't match up for the way they are, it's usually a giant red flag. So as we get into the house, walking through, there's another sign that I just found. So in this one section, we have 3 different floor heights. We got one that sits about 1 inch above the floor, one's a 1/2 inch, and one's straight to plywood. So that tells me all the flooring was not professionally installed, and a lot of the stuff that we were gonna try to salvage in our exit plan is not salvageable. We need to rip out all the floors throughout the house and level them all out because we have a lot of inconsistent floor heights. Again, another red flag. So as we make our way through here, here's another telltale sign. This house has plenty of telltale signs. Typically, this is a 1950s kind of mid-century style home that's been renovated over time. Most of these homes are built on straight lines, right? Like a mid-century home typically has straight lines or has some kind of geometric shapes. I'm looking at this and I can tell that they ripped this whole thing out, and we have a closet, and then this is built at a 45-degree angle. A shelf. Building this at a 45-degree angle does no good. There's no purpose. The home was never built this way. So they decided they needed a little storage spot, probably for firewood at some point, and they decided to just build it on this angle. Another sign that framing was done incorrectly in the house. If they can't even frame a closet correctly, there's gonna be some structural framing that's also missing. So as we make our way through, they had remodeled the kitchen in the 90s. That's how they kind of described it to us, was that it had been fully renovated in the 90s. But as I'm walking through this, I'm seeing more red flags for this wasn't done correctly. A, there's no toe kick on the cabinets. B, none of the cabinet boxes have any kind of particle board or anything below them, right? So it looks like they kind of just bought newer cabinets and kind of jerry-rigged them in. So as we make our way through the kitchen, also things that I look at that are another telltale signs is where's my outlet locations. Depending on the area, code is you gotta have your outlets at a certain distance apart. I'm seeing them as all over the place. There's no consistent run here. So it looks like they hired an electrician, or maybe they did the electrical themselves, and they kind of just stuck the plugs and switches wherever they want. Typically what that means is you're gonna have to rewire the whole house. So if you don't plan accordingly for a full rewire rather than a partial rewire, that can cost you thousands of dollars. Typically a partial rewire costs us about $2 a square foot for a whole house. For a full rewire, it can run $3 to $4 a square foot. So that can be a budget miss of almost 100% if you don't look at all the fine details. I'm also looking at this wall through here on the electrical, and I noticed that there's 2 telltale signs. Per code, we're supposed to have an outlet on this wall. This isn't no man's land. This is not how electricians are usually going to place their outlets. So they kind of just fished in their own outlet. That's telling me I'm going to need outlets on this side, which is going to require me to cut open all the drywall, which wasn't in my original budget, and I'm going to have to rewire this whole section. As I'm walking through these houses, as I see these signs, it's not that I get too afraid to buy these houses, I just need to increase my budget. So we went from a partial rewire to a full rewire. So as we make our way through the rest of the house, I'm looking for more signs. So another weird sign that I'm seeing is what is going on with your electrical. We talked about the outlets, but as we walk into our entryway, every light is on a pole chain. That is not normal. So we know that an electrician at some point added in a light fixture, but they didn't run any Romex down or put any switches through the house. Again, not a normal practice for most electricians, and typically not how it's gonna be permitted. So again, another telltale sign that this house needs to be fully rewired. Now, don't forget, like I said earlier, the owners told us that they had done all the electrical in the house and that they put a new panel in. So I'm already seeing that it needs to be fully rewired based on this first bit of walkthrough. As we make our way through, I'm actually just wrapping my brain around this bedroom. So we have a room that has 2 different closets in it, and it has 2 different dimensions. At one point, the bedroom is about 10 feet, the other point is 12 feet. Also, we had a normal closet here, and then we have this new closet here. So this here looks like an illegal add-on, or a non-permitted add-on. We pulled the tax record on the property, we looked at the square footage, we got the dimensions. This was not included in any of the tax record information. That means this is an unpermitted addition. That can be detrimental to your deal. If we go pull building permits and the inspector comes out and everything's open and he notates that the house is actually bigger, that's gonna trigger a new permit. That new permit can take me an additional 4 to 6 months to obtain, and not only that, it's gonna have different requirements. The requirements are gonna be, I need to upgrade the structure to new code because I'm adding to the footprint. That can substantially affect my renovation budget by almost $30 a square foot. This is a 3,000 square foot house, so that could be $90,000 off the plan. So what we need to plan accordingly on is either remove the addition, because then we don't need to worry about permanent and framing this all back in, or going in and putting the plan in to add this into the square footage. At that point too, then we're gonna need to square out the room and demo this whole part out and get this to be more conforming. When you go to sell your flip, it is very important that you make your house conforming in most markets. People don't wanna buy more expensive homes if they have weirdness going on. So as we make our way through, we're looking for other telltale signs. So here's another weird addition that is another red flag for your flip. As we get here, we have 2 different floor heights. The reason we have 2 different floor heights is because what they did is they built it right on top of the deck. So this structure here is not legitimately and structurally built right. We're gonna need to demo this off and frame this straight in and put a window in or a door out to the deck so it's more conforming and it's up to code. As of right now, this is built over a deck structure, not a house structure, so it's not gonna be stable. Another telltale sign for a Weekend Warrior special is I'm looking at this slider install. The slider, the bezel, is at the floor height. This should be on top of the floor here. So someone just cut this in and dropped it because it was easy to do. They wanted to save the time and not go up and cut into the header because it's more work. Instead, they just dropped it below the floor height. So again, this is not the normal way to install it. So you could have brand new hardwoods, a brand new slider, and if it's not set right, you might have to rip it all out. We make our way out to a deck, which is actually pretty cool. We've got a deck off our new potential master. So they built this deck, what they told us, about 5 years ago. So that's one thing I want to look into. Decks in wood can be very, very expensive, and so you want to make sure it's built properly. I'm looking at this railing right here. This is an expensive railing. We got glass panes and a lot of wood with lighting built in. But let's check out what's going on here. So visually from pictures, it looked great. And then you look at how much it moves. This is not normal. The reason being it's moving so much is, again, the seller probably was hanging out with his buddies, drinking a couple beers, building this on the weekend. They didn't use the right support. They just built the wood, dropped it in, and put in L brackets. This is not how you build a deck. So now we have this beautiful, nice deck, or what we could make beautiful, but instead we have to tear the whole thing off and put it back on. That's a $10,000 deck. So if we were just going off the visuals, we would have missed this in our budget. So as you're doing your walkthroughs, don't just, if it's shiny, still check it, right? Make sure it's not moving right. And what this is also probably telling me is I bet when we go down below that the underneath structure is also built incorrectly. Pools. Pools can be a major red flag for your flip. Not because they're bad to sell. Actually, in the Pacific Northwest, we've seen a sudden surge in pricing. We've had a lot of California relocation buyers, which means they're used to pools. They like their outdoor spaces. We had the pandemic, so people, again, want to enjoy their yard more. So properties with pools have actually been surging on price. The problem with the pool, or the red flag on it, is that they can be extremely expensive if they're not well taken care of. So the owner had told us they had redone the whole pool system. That was a good bonus for us, so we felt comfortable before we contracted it. Turns out they only did half the job. They recoated the whole thing, sealed it up. They didn't replace all the tile. The tile is gonna cost us about $2,000. Instead of replacing the tile like they should have, they just painted over it. That's not the right way to install it. In addition to, they said they'd been servicing the pool system, which is a giant boiler system. These systems can cost anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000. So if they're not serviced correctly, they break down, you need to replace. They had been servicing it, but their handyman friend had been doing it, not a professional. So we sent a professional company out to inspect it, and they said it needs a full replacement. So again, he was working on it himself. He thought it worked fine, but it didn't meet code. They had started kind of like messing with things and moving things around, and so we have to now redo the whole thing. So always check out the pool, make sure it's not leaking. The best thing you can do is fill it with water to make sure it's not losing water, and then make sure it runs correctly. Pool boilers are hard to judge. Bring a professional out to judge what needs to be done and give you the right scope of work. So as you're walking your next potential flip property, again, notate what is making sense and not making sense, right? That's gonna tell you the story. So as we look at this French door, they actually had installed probably some wood French doors about 10 years ago. And then here, they did something a little weird, right? Something that doesn't make sense. He then took a storm door and just screwed it right into the siding for some reason. This is not the proper way to install this. This whole door is not installed correctly. As you can see, it's coming off. He's got it was going so crazy, he put his chain on so he blew up this, put his chain on, another Weekend Warrior special right here. And now we have a door with a threshold with a second door that's just mounted to the siding. He punched holes in the siding. That can cause water intrusion. It just causes more issues. On the first floor, we have uncovered massive amounts of homeowner Weekend Warrior specials, right? They put in different types of windows. They put in different types of doors. They haven't framed things correctly. They enclose space. We're only halfway through the project. So we're gonna check out the basement now and see what's going on there. So why is there French doors here? Right? Another telltale sign. If it logically doesn't make sense for flow, like you don't put French doors in your basement that should be open or was open at one point. The doors are swinging into the hallways, they're swinging in these spaces. They don't have the right, they're actually not set at all correctly. So again, if the flow's off, that's usually a sign. So as we're coming through, another sign I would have. They've left a lot of stuff in this house, but why did they pull the carpet out? We could have moisture in here. So anytime I get to a potential investment that's fully finished basement, if I see flooring pulled out, that's a sign that they could have had some sort of water intrusion. So I'm gonna be looking for water spots and damage, because if I need to put a drain system in here, that can cost me $7,000. So we're gonna be looking for water spots. Yeah, this doesn't make sense either. One of the best signs is, does it make sense? They had set up for a water line fridge here. They got their power, their water line. The fridge is gonna be roughly to right here. Your sink location's right here. This is not gonna fit. So this should have been actually shifted down probably another 2 feet for it to flow right. And so for us to put a mother-in-law, we're gonna have to replumb this whole section. The reason this guy probably did this is because he didn't wanna get too close to the electrical. He didn't wanna have to move this himself. So instead of moving the electrical to the right location, he just put the plumbing where he thought it worked. Problem is, you can't get a sink and a fridge in now, so it's totally worthless. It needs to be completely ripped out. So as I get into these spaces, things I'm noticing, they finished this basement, they told us they did. The outlets are about 12 inches higher, so it looks like they didn't rewire this correctly either. These outlets should be more down here. And the seller did tell us they finished this whole space, so they must have done it with no permit. We couldn't find any permits on hand. What do we got here? Hidden gem. We got a sauna. So guys, make sure you watch this video so you don't sweat out your next deal. So it looks like they built a sauna in here. Again, this was definitely built by the homeowner. They actually got the right wood in here. They got, hey, nice sauna setup. You even got your little, this is probably the most well-built thing I've found in the house so far. But it looks like they put the wrong ceiling in here. I'm not seeing, I don't know saunas as well as most things because I don't install them a lot. But this looks like this wood is rottable wood. This just looks like particle board, like press board. Oh yeah, you can see it's still holding some water damage and it's not sealed in. So like all the steam's just going into the corner of this house. So we could have a lot of problems behind this wood. Like if you got a lot of heat coming through and it's leaking right through, that's getting into your studs, that could get into your electrical. This could cause issues. Oh, and it's got a giant hole in it. I don't think saunas are supposed to have giant holes in them. What do we got going on here? There's another plumbing stat, another plumbing shut off. I don't know if that's, oh, and then I'm looking here. This is a jerry rig job. Yeah, this house we thought was gonna be cosmetic is gonna need a full redo on everything. Door's not placed right either. Can you imagine if you got stuck in this thing because the door wasn't put in right? These Weekend Warrior houses are dangerous. All right. As we're coming through, look, they were gonna install their own hot water tank. They pulled it out, we're gonna start putting it in. I can already see, they're putting it in this closet. They got their water coming through in different areas, galvanized, that's gonna need to be replaced. I can see they haven't set it up for a stand We have no expansion tank and stuff that it doesn't look like they were gonna be putting in anyways. And also you guys, so they're gonna reinstall this. So most of the time you guys, you can see how old they are. They're stamped on. They ripped it off. So they didn't want to tell us how old this tank is. I guarantee you this is over 10 years old, which is over its useful life. So again, this is a $1,200 budget item. Also, it's just telling me they install stuff however which way they want. Little flip tip, don't install an old bad hot water tank and just rip the tag off and think it's gonna fly. These things could turn into a complete nightmare in a bee's nest once we start opening it up. And it's okay to buy a bee's nest with some hidden cost. It's just a matter of you budget accordingly. One good thing is in this room we got 12-foot ceilings. In this room we don't because of our ducts running through. And then, oh, here we go. Here's a remodeled bathroom. Based on everything I've seen throughout this house, I'm a little worried about the quality of what's inside the walls here. So as we come in, it actually looks pretty good. Flooring set, it's got a mud pan, plumbing set. I mean, it's actually not a terrible bathroom. It's not the style I put in. But you guys, based on what I've seen, I'm assuming I need to rip this out, right? If you did 90% of the house wrong, chances are this wasn't done right too. So we're gonna plan on just ripping this out. Oh, we got more. All right, here's our furnace. Which, things you can always do, guys, when you're coming to your project, look for install, right? The last time that this furnace was cleaned was in April 5th, 1983. I was only 3 months old in my mom's belly at the time. So this furnace was cleaned before I was even born. That was the last time it was cleaned. So you can check for this, right? That means this is gonna need a replacement in here. It can cost you, that's a big liability for you. So make sure you have a licensed professional look at that, do a gas line check, and make sure it's not leaking. I'm hoping we don't have to rebudget here because now what I'm looking at, I'm looking at the install job. It was done wrong. We might have to redo all these windows. So look at this. These are new windows. They said they put these in there 2 years ago. They weren't framed straight, so they're not opening right. The reason they're so hard is because I bet you they didn't put a level on this. They just took out what's there and jammed it right in. Also, I'm seeing where they set their screws here. These aren't lined up. So I can tell based on the screws whether it's actually straight or not. Now the windows are good, but we're gonna have to pay someone to reset these all. That's gonna be an expensive bill. I mean, that's probably gonna cost us about 150 bucks a window to take them back out and reset them in. Good news is we don't have to buy new windows. Bad news is we basically have to install them all. They are really good windows actually. They're like storm windows. They got triple pane, built-in screens. I mean, honestly, they're nicer than the stuff we put in. Oh yeah, this one barely won't even open. So again, little things like that, checking your windows, seeing if they open correctly. Not if they're old, right? In a fixer house, you just know you have to rip them out, so it's pretty easy. But if they're new and you're not checking them and you have to replace them anyways, it screws up your whole budget. Another sign of Weekend Warrior. We have a wall here that's got 3 different textures on it. The reason being is because the right way to do this would to be rip off the wallpaper and then retexture it, prime it, paint it. What they try to do here, oh, that's a good one. They ripped off part of the wallpaper, then they figured out what a pain in the butt it is, and they decided to just paint right over it. So now we have half the walls in the house have wallpaper, they have bad texture. We're gonna need to retexture this whole house and finish the wallpaper removal. Now that they painted over it, it's gonna cost us twice as much to remove this. So that's a big budget issue. This is probably gonna cost us $10,000 in texture in this house. So little things like this will wreck your budget. So, you know, don't just walk through your properties, look for all the major bad things. Look at the good things too and see if they're actually salvageable or not. Most of this game in the flipping business is working with what you have and designing the right plan around it. If you bypass the stuff that's the kind of small stuff that are more cosmetics and you have to redo it anyways, your plan's gonna blow up. They have ran their deck boards right to the concrete. So if water, in theory, so what they actually have going on here, they got a gutter that comes down onto their concrete walkway. The water then runs through here. And then you have wood, which rots when it runs into too much water. And that's why these boards just came up. It goes right into this crevice and it's rotting this whole deck out. So not thought out when they installed it. We're gonna, again, need to replace this whole deck system in here. Not only are we gonna have to replace the boards, we're gonna replace the system. So as we make our way through, I'm looking at gutters. That's a big deal. I'm always checking my water spaces. In the Pacific Northwest, water can just erode a house. So I'm always seeing where the gutters are ran. I'm seeing if they're affecting the corners. That can cause foundation issues. And so as I'm looking at the underside of this deck, actually, I see a lot of good things here. They put in massive amount of pressure treated wood. They actually do look like they framed this correctly at the top. And so visually, and this is what we saw in the photos too, we thought we were only have to replace the deck boards. This structure is good. The problem is, they've now ran, what happened is we had a cantilevered deck before, and they just run it straight to the house. This is not attached as code. The city of Seattle is going to require us to anchor bolt this in. We're going to have to rip off this deck, rip off the ledger, cut this siding out, and then recut all these boards. So all these expensive pressure treated boards are now going to be about 6 inches too short. They're supposed to go all the way in and attach in. So this lumber, which is probably a good $4,000 in lumber with all the deck boards, is now not usable. So we can't even salvage it, we have to replace it. So things like decks are great ways for you to check red flags. If it's not supported correctly and it's not built with the wrong kind of wood, that means that they didn't build it with any kind of logic, and to really be wary. So I'm already looking at this too. They just sistered in. Oh, this is so bad actually, now I'm looking at this. They have, it's cantilevered out, so at some point they cut it off. That's where the deck was. The deck was built into the structure when they built it. So what they did is they just brought their new deck boards in and they sunk 3 screws into that. There's no support, there's no anchor bolts, there's nothing bolted to the house. They have 3 screws per beam running. That is not gonna hold. And so like in a major shake, this thing's gonna move. I wonder what's gonna happen if I touch this over here. I like the shake test. Does it shake and move? Oh, this is built pretty well. This does have some pretty good footings here too. So unfortunately, 70% of the deck was built right, 30% was wrong. The 30% is gonna cost for full replacement. It's a big deal. So as we kind of move forward, we're looking around. I'm always looking for signs of issues, right? We got more gutter issues. This is the 3rd style gutter I've seen in this house. So again, they've just been kind of bootlegging it in. I don't know what this is. This is a little bit of a concern based on the fact that everything's been kind of slapped together. There was some sort of access hole here that they just filled in with concrete. We don't know what's underneath that. That could be a problem. Make our way through. There's our sewer line access. You know, as I'm walking next to your properties, I'm looking for oil tank access lids. I'm looking for sewer line access lids. You know, if I have an oil tank, that could be a red flag. Did it leak? Is there soil contamination? Here's another thing that I'm looking at. How they built this. This was built after the fact, about 30 years after the house. The way they built it, which is actually a value add, we were gonna turn this into a pool party room. Problem is, we're gonna have to put more money into this because they built it right to the ground and it's all rotted out now. The kick test, my second favorite test. Shake and kick things and see if it moves. Oh, look at this guy. Here's my shake test. This didn't pass the test. They had a light post here, guys, and they just bolted it down to the concrete and half of it's fallen off. All right, and then, uh-oh, shake test. Probably not built to code, right? So all red flags, you guys, this has gone from a cosmetic fixture to a full studs down. Actually, and what I'm looking at here too, when we're talking about additions, you can always tell based on the schematic of the house, right? Late 1950s, early 60s, those are usually squared out boxes. Look what we have here. There's a weird random box built right off the side of this thing. And not only that, remember what we talked about that deck and how it wasn't properly structurally supported. So now you have living space on top of a deck that is not properly supported. What you want to do is always pull you can always, as you're looking at an investment, you can always pull the tax record and permits and see if the square footage is included. This square footage is not included in our 3,000 square feet. The reason I know that is because the tax record says it's 1,500 square feet up, 1,500 square feet down. This is a giant box. it should be more like 2,000 square feet down and 1,500 square feet down. So I already know this wasn't permitted. Honestly, the cheapest way for us to fix this is just to knock it off. We don't need it for the rooms. We're gonna demo that off and have to fix the siding. Hopefully you enjoyed our walkthrough of our Weekend Warrior special house that we're closing on in a week. So remember, if you want to avoid these red flags and issues on your next problem project, you can do things like pull the property tax record, verify the square footage, has there been any illegal additions? Slow your walkthrough down. Don't just look at the really bad stuff, look at the good stuff. Was it installed correctly? Does it make sense? These are all going to be indicators. And if you don't know how to look for those things, I highly suggest bringing your general contractor and a home inspector so they can help you verify and mitigate your risk. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Make sure you click and subscribe below. And for more flip tips, check me out on my Instagram at jdainflips and our YouTube channel, Project RE.